Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to First Kings chapter 3. 28 verses in this chapter. We have an addition in the Masoretic text. I'm going to read the addition for you. And Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house and the house of Adonai and the wall of Jerusalem round about. Okay, in verse 2 describes how people burnt incense versus they sacrificed. So sacrifice literally means a slaughter. However, burning incense can mean literally burning incense, obviously, and secondly, it can also mean to smoke a sacrifice or make a sacrifice to smoke. Think of smoked salmon, perhaps. But so that's another definition, and it seems that that is what they were doing, the people and Solomon himself. However, only Solomon was sacrificing. So there seems to be a distinction between sacrificing and burning incense. Verse 4, the highest place versus the great high place. Verses 4 to 5 prove that punctuation matters. So let's read it in the Septuagint, talking about the altar that is in Gibeon, period. And then it goes on to describe how King Solomon had a dream, and we're not provided the location of that dream. However, in the Masoretic, it reads as such: Solomon offered upon that altar, period. And then it says, in Gibeon, Adonai appeared to Solomon. So they're saying that, the translator anyway, is saying that Adonai appeared to Solomon in Gibeon. However, we know it doesn't make as much sense because the altar is where is located in Gibeon, as is proven in the first part of the verse. He arose and went to Gibeon to do what? To sacrifice there, because that's where the altar was. Okay, so that's verse 4 to 5. Verse 5 says, ask some petition for yourself. So ask, make a request, versus what I shall give you. So I don't know if it's wildly different, but it's difference of semantics. Verse 6, set him versus given him. So Adonai has set David's son, not that he's given him a son. He gave him many sons, but it's a son specifically to sit on the throne. I do understand that. It's just not written as such in the Septuagint. Appointed in verse 7, appointed versus made. So anointed versus created. In the room of David versus instead of David. So a little more respectful in the Septuagint in its tone. Verse 9, a heart to hear versus an understanding heart. So a heart that is willing to hear, it seems. To hear to do what? I'm going to jump ahead and say it means a heart to hear in order to discern. And we're going to see that later down as we go forward. There's an omission, a significant difference here, and that omission is the word justly. Not just to judge the people, but to judge them in a just manner, justly. Great. What does great mean? Great people means great by their prestige versus great in numbers. Verse 10, it was pleasing before Adonai versus the speech pleased Adonai. So Solomon was altogether pleasing, including the intent of his heart, versus only his words were pleasing. Verse 11, there's an omission of this thing of me. So it shows how Adonai is the source of the good things that he was given. To hear versus discern. to hear means to hear in order to perceive, actually, in both. It's just not immediately discerned, pun intended, because you have to do your research. And when you do your research, you will see that the original Hebrew word for discern is shama, which means to hear. And there are many connotations for what this means, but specifically, I agree with the translator. It is to hear in order to, for the purpose of discerning. And this comes from Shama, once again, which relates to Shema, which means to hear and obey, but again, not using it in that context or that connotation. Verse 12. Question: Was not Yeshua HaMashiach like this, an individual with an understanding and wise heart? I would say yes, he was. So I don't believe this applies to all humanity for all time. This only applies, in my opinion, to only kings, because verse 13 goes on to explain that no kings will be like you. So that's just my opinion. Verse 15 talks about how Solomon stood before the altar that was in front of the Ark of the Covenant. He didn't stand in front of the Ark of the Covenant. He stood in front of the altar that was in front of the Ark of the Covenant. So that's just more. We're going to be really specific and fact-based. We have to look at the Septuagint. And then we look at the banquet, another fact-based. We want to get our facts straight, that King Solomon made not just a little feast, not just a meal, made a great banquet for not just his servants, but also for himself. So he partook in that great banquet. Okay, verse 16, get straight to the point. These are not just women, they're two harlots, whereas the Masoretic takes a bit of time to reveal that. Verse 17, an omission. Hear me versus O my Adon. We were delivered versus I was delivered. So she also gets straight to the point. The woman telling the truth, they call her the one woman. And then the woman lying is called the other woman. So we were delivered. She just sets the stage and is transparent from the get-go. In the Masoretic, she seems to hide the fact that the other woman was delivering a child. And then verse 18, no one versus no stranger. Verse 19, overlaid can mean many things, but can mean rolling over the child, that she lay on the child, that she smothered the child accidentally, unintentionally, and suffocated the child unintentionally due to her laying on the child. Because, and I had to do my research on this, I don't know much about infants, but newborn babies need to sleep on their backs due to the high risk of suffocation, because as a result of their inability to turn their heads for air. So they do not have muscle control over their neck, or their necks are not strong enough, their head muscles are not strong enough to do that. Verse 20. So a really tragic situation that had occurred. Middle of the night versus midnight. From my arms versus from beside me. So we can see the other woman really wanted to deceive, was malicious in that, in what she had done. Addition of while thine handmaid slept. That is not just an assumption. It's not an assumption. It's just straightforward. It's obvious. That's what happened. She was not aware of it. Verse 21, he versus it, talking about her baby boy versus just it, not as personal. I considered him, so she considered the condition of the child, his appearance perhaps, versus I considered the situation. Now I'm putting that in, that's how I interpret it, because I considered it. What is it? Is it the boy, or is it the matter altogether? It's hard to say. Verse 22, addition of, and this said no, but the dead is thy son and the living is my son. We're going to see in the Septuagint actually reveals that yes, this is what was said by both women, but it's just revealing it later on. Verse 24, fetch me or bring me the sword. So no, they're not bringing a sword to King Solomon. He's not the one holding it or handling it. Someone else is actually handling the sword, because he's instructing them to do what he will instruct them to do, which is divide the live child. He's not going to divide it. It's someone else, his servant, doing it for him. Verse 26, hers versus thine. So give her, okay, where am I here? Give her the child. Let it, the other said, so the woman lying said, let it be neither mine nor hers. So she's not speaking to the king, she's speaking to the woman. Let it be neither mine nor yours. Okay, we can see she's really taking this badly and only digging herself a deeper and deeper hole. Big difference in verse 27, or first one of this chapter. It says here, King Solomon said, give her the child. So give the child to her. That said, give it to her, and by no means slay it. She is its mother. So King Solomon is identifying the woman by her statement. Now, how does the Masoretic read? How does it read? The king answered and said, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. Now, this is how I've always understood it. It seems a little more dramatic, but it also seems a little repetitious, because why would King Solomon not only state the obvious, that obviously why would he, don't kill it and give her the living child. This means give the other woman the child, ironically. So she is the mother thereof. So give her the living child, in no way slay it. Okay, because why is this a contradiction, or why does it not make too much sense? Well, let's read it again, the previous verse. The woman who's telling the truth is saying, give her the living child. So who's her? Is it the woman telling the truth? No, she's saying, give the woman lying the living child, just so her baby can live, and in no wise slay it. So the king is reiterating this and saying, give her the living child. Who's her? The one that is lying, the one who the woman telling the truth told to give it to. So, okay, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but basically, the woman telling the truth is saying, give the woman lying, give her the living child. And then King Solomon backs her up and says, okay, yes, give her the living child. Okay, so that's how I understand it. It's complete contradiction. It just doesn't make sense. In the Masoretic, if you really, really dwell on it, meditate on it. And the Septuagint makes complete sense, because both of them are speaking. The woman who's telling the truth is saying, I pray you give her the child and no way slay it. But the one lying is saying, don't let it be mine or hers, divide it. Okay, so they're both speaking to the king. She's not speaking to King Solomon. So I seem to have made a mistake. She's not speaking to King Solomon. The Masoretic seems to imply she is. Or I should say, okay, let me rewind. I'm making a lot of mistakes right now. She is speaking to King Solomon. Let it be neither mine nor hers. In the Masoretic text, she's speaking to the other woman. That is not what is happening, since they are being judged by the king, like in a court of laws kind of scenario. Okay. So that's verse 27. Again, she just supports, giving the other woman the child. Or I should say King Solomon supports that in the Masoretic. Okay, so that's verse 26. Okay, I think I put the wrong verse. did. Okay. So that's verse 26. So Solomon said, give the child to her that said, um, give it to her, by no means slay it. Okay, so that is verse 27. And my notes seem to be wrong here. Okay, verse 28, it says here, Israel feared before the king versus Israel feared the king. So they feared before his presence. They feared his reputation. They didn't fear him like he was a terror. They feared the wisdom that he had and feared his reputation, his presence. They feared before him. Okay, so that's all for this video. Thank you very much for your time. Till next time, I bid you all Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and Maranatha.